Now, we're going to go into the book, continue the book of Leviticus. I must confess that having to prepare these Bible studies have brought such an understanding of Leviticus to me. You remember, I've been a Christian for nearly half a century. I've been a Christian like 48 years and some months. At the end of this year, it'll be 49 years. And there are so many things I did not understand. My prayer and hope for you is that you won't wait that long to understand it, but that you'll grab the opportunity to partake and to grow and to understand something the Lord has written. And believe me, when I was studying, I was saying God is no idler. He has not put anything in his word just because he wanted to fill up the pages. Everything has a meaning and everything is intended for you and for myself. So we're going to go straight in. We're at Leviticus chapter 3, right? Am I correct? And Leviticus chapter 3, we're going to go into the peace offering. Now, to refresh people, especially those who were not with us before, we looked at the whole burnt offering. That's number one. We looked at the grain offerings, which was grain, ground, and breads, etc. And we also looked, and now we're going to look at the peace offering. Now, these three offerings were voluntary offerings. People volunteered to give it for various reasons. The whole burnt offering, as we said, we're not going to go back through it, is one of the very significant ones. It represents our giving our entire self to God. But today we're at the peace offering, another voluntary offering. After this, we're going to go into the sin offering in Leviticus chapter 4. I don't think we'll reach a guilt offering, which is in Leviticus chapter 5. So I'm just telling the order in which we're going. So that is the Levitical sacrificial system. There are 5 major sacrifices. So as we go straight into chapter 3, which has to do with the peace offering, I'll take the opportunity right here to tell you that you'll see it called different names in different translations of the Bible. Like here it is being called a fellowship offering. So it's called a peace offering, the fellowship offering. It is also called a thanks offering or thanksgiving offering. So you do not get confused. It's the same offering. And by the time you go through it, you're going to understand just why it has so many names. So let's get to it now. I'm going to ask for a reader, please.
The fellowship offering. If your offering is a fellowship offering and you offer an animal from the herd, whether male or female, you are to present before the Lord an animal without defect. You are to lay your hand on the head of your offering and slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priest, shall splash the blood against the sides of the altar. From the fellowship offering, you are to bring a food offering to the Lord, the internal organs and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which you will remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons are to burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering that is lying on the burning wood. It is a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord.
Praise God. Let me say something here so we don't forget what we just... So as I said before, we're looking at a peace offering or the fellowship offering or the thanksgiving offering. And you're going to find it outlined in Leviticus chapter 3, 1 to 17. But you're also going to begin to understand it better when you augment this with Leviticus 7, 11 to 17 and 28 to 34. So let's go rolling on this. So these are the various names of this offering. And these voluntary offerings, to a certain degree, are not sin offerings. They have nothing really to do with sin. Very often we think of the sacrifice, we think only of sin. We think only of sin. But you'll understand as you look at the peace offering that this is not all. So it is normally given for three main reasons. One is for thanksgiving. Two is if you have completed a vow. And three is just as a free will offering. Now, we have experienced times when we just feel a well of thanksgiving and a well of appreciation to God, and we will lift our hands as a Father. I thank you, Lord. It's not because we have sinned, it's not because anything has happened, but there's this feeling of joy in the Lord. And so this offering was like that kind of offering. It could also be direct thanksgiving for something God did. Suppose somebody got healed miraculously. You might want to bring a thank offering to God. Or if you had completed a vow, you made a vow and said, God, I'll do such and such. I'm asking you to do X, and God has done it. You'll bring that offering to God. So you can understand the purposes of fellowship offering, a peace offering before God. If you look at it carefully, you will see that the selection of what can be brought in this offering is wider. And I want you to scroll back, or it might actually be on the screen now. You have to offer a male or female without defect. And it tells you from the herd, right? Or from the flock. So you have a much broader range of what you could offer to God in this offering. So let's continue reading as we go forward. We look at what the priest did with the sacrifice as we go down.
If you offer an animal from the flock as a fellowship offering to the Lord, you are to offer a male or female without defect. If you offer a lamb, you are to present it before the Lord. Lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall splash its blood against the sides of the altar. I think we read this part, didn't we?
Oh, just continue reading.
From the fellowship offering, you are to bring a food offering to the Lord. It's fat, the entire fat tail. Okay. Cut off close to the backbone, the internal organs, and all the fat that is connected to them. Both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which you will remove with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering presented to the Lord.
Let me just say something here, because you're going to actually take out the kidney and all the fat on the kidney. You're going to take out the liver and the fat on the liver. And you're going to take the tail with the fat, you're going to cut it close, as they say, to the what they call a rump bone, and take that fatty around the tail fat. Put the Lord as well. Now, reading it, I had to smile, because first thing you have to know is that the sheep, which was used then, carried a fattier tail area, very heavy and fat, the breed of sheep. But the reason I smiled is that it was a delicacy in ancient Israel. Pretty much like, I'm a Jamaican, and one of my favorite meats is oxtail. So it's actually to a great extent like oxtail. Very, very prized part of the sheep. So they had to cut out all that, and all that was God's, right? All the fats that came in there, and including, as I said, the kidney and the liver. So you might ask yourself, why the kidney and the liver? Well, one, in those days, they saw the kidney as very precious, just as we see the heart today. So today we think of the heart as a seat of our emotions. If we're saying we're in love with somebody, we draw a heart. It's very symbolic. In those days, it was a kidney. That's why they value the kidney. But the liver now was used a lot for divination in those days. And in fact, there are other references in the Bible in which the liver is cited for divination. So God wanted all those parts. He wanted the passion. He wanted for you to know that, for all the heathen cultures, and for Israel to know that everything, or no divination, I am God who's going to lead you. I am the seat of your passion. You're going to give me everything. We're pretty much like that. We say you need to give God your heart. that means the seat of your affections. So it's pretty much the same type of things. So all these fats and these particular organs were put on the altar and burned to God. Now you can appreciate that there were other segments that were not put on the altar. So we're going to see what became of them as we read. Continue, please.
If your offering is a goat, you are to present it before the Lord. Lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall splash its blood against the sides of the altar. From what you offer, you are to present this food offering to the Lord, the internal organs and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with the liver on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which you will remove with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering, a pleasing aroma. All the fat is the Lord's. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come wherever you live. You must not eat any fat or any blood.
All right. So the fat represented prosperity and well-being. The blood represented life and would eventually represent the source of atonement for sin, for man's sin. So these are precious to God. These come back to him. Now let's look at a few points as they have to do with this offering. But before we do that, let's look at the verses in 7, 11 to 17. So we get a complete picture of this offering. Leviticus 7, 11 to 17, and then 28 to 34. So we get a good picture of the whole peace offering.
This is Leviticus 7, Pastor.
Yes, the reader.
The fellowship offering. These are the regulations for the fellowship offering anyone may present to the Lord. If they offer it as an expression of thankfulness, then along with this thank offering, they are to offer thick loaves made without yeast and with olive oil mixed in, thin loaves made without yeast and brushed with oil, and thick loaves of the finest flour well kneaded and with oil mixed in. Along with their fellowship offering of thanksgiving, they are to present an offering with thick loaves of bread made with yeast. They are to bring one of each kind as an offering, a contribution to the Lord. It belongs to the priest who splashes the blood of the fellowship offering against the altar. The meat of their fellowship offering of thanksgiving must be eaten on the day it is offered. They must leave none of it till morning. If, however,
Go ahead.
If, however, their offering is the result of a vow or is a free will offering, the sacrifice shall be eaten on the day they offer it, but anything left over may be eaten the next day. Any meat of the sacrifice left over till the third day must be burned up. If any meat of the fellowship...
You can stop here. All right. So what we said here is that this peace offering or fellowship offering was a composite offering. So you had the meat component and you had the bread and grain component. It was a combined offering. So we already explained the portion that God wanted laid on the altar. Now, what happened to the rest of the meat? And I'll talk about that before we go to the grain and the bread. The rest of it, we're going to see as we read down further in this chapter that the priest is going to get some. And the offerer is going to get some as well. So the priest gets some, the offerer gets some, and God gets some. And that is where the name fellowship originates, because this is like a combination feast. Now, what we're looking at here, we're looking at the fact that it was not just a meat offering. It had a bread grain component. So what the three types of bread described here, what they would do is take one of each type and put it on the fat and the liver and the kidney and the tail offering on the altar. That's God's portion. The rest again was shared along with the rest of the meat between the offerer and the high priest and the priesthood. Now, let me stop here to make a little line of delineation. You would find the high priest getting some, and the immediate priest ministry would get some as well, right? So that is what you find operating here. So the fellowship offering is a true fellowship offering where people are eating together, the priesthood, the offerer, and God, all in a sort of fellowship mode as they consume both bread and meat. And I explained to you before that it was offered as thanksgiving, as fellowship. It really didn't have anything to do with sin, right? It was a joyous offering. In fact, some persons called it the offering of well-being. And so that's what it is called sometimes, right? We're going to read on further just to look at how the meat was divided up and the grain as well. So read for me now, verses, is it, it's 20 to 34? Yes. This is Leviticus 7, 28 to 34. Yes, go ahead.
The priest's share. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, anyone who brings a fellowship offering to the Lord is to bring part of it as a sacrifice to the Lord. With their own hands, they are to present the food offering to the Lord. They are to bring the fat together with the breast and wave the breast before the Lord as a wave offering. The priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast belongs to Aaron and his sons. You are to give the right thigh of your fellowship offerings to the priest as a contribution. The son of Aaron who offers the blood and the fat of the fellowship offering shall have the right thigh as his share. From the fellowship offerings of the Israelites, I have taken the breast that is waved and the thigh that is presented, and have given them to Aaron the priest and his sons as their perpetual share from the Israelites.
Okay, so you have heard in the New Testament that the priest eats from the altar. And this is one of the examples of where the priest eats from the altar. Even Paul the Apostle mentioned this particular activity. So Aaron, the high priest family, the high priest might not be there for the sacrifice, but the high priest family would receive a portion, and the direct ministry priest would receive a portion. And I mentioned before, the offerer gets a portion and God gets a portion. Interestingly, when you read it in details, it suggests this. It suggests that here is my offering. I'm bringing it to God. But first, let me take up God's portion first of all and place it on the altar. And God is going to get everything he asks for. He asks for the fat. He asks for the kidney, the liver, and all the fat around it, and the tail and all the fat around it, and one of each of the bread. This is yours, God. I've carried it, but I'm going to give you yours first. And then I am going to do what is prescribed. And I'm going to give the high priest family the shoulder, and I'm going to give the officiating priest the thigh. The rest of it, after I've fulfilled God's requirement, is going to be for me and my family and friends to consume. I don't think we could be more graphic than that in terms of how we are to relate to God's offering in this day and age, right? This is so graphic. And we thank God for this portion of scripture. Now, I don't know if anybody, I'm actually going to ask somebody, can you summarize for me either part of what I just said? You know, just to make sure we're all understanding fully. Anybody at all?
I'm not going to go into all the details.
No, you don't have to go into detail, but just a synopsis.
A peace offering had both grain, bread, and meat, you know, as a part of it. Portion of it is for the Lord. That's given first. And then there's the other portion that goes to the priest. And then the offerer themselves also gets a portion. So that's where the whole fellowship part of it comes from.
Right.
So there's a whole sharing that is taking place. Yes. And some persons call this particular offering also the offering of well-being offering.
Well-being, right. And I'm sure at some point we've all had that sense of well-being in the Lord, and we just lift up our hands and give thanks and praise to God. That's why it has nothing really to do with sin. Right? It's a totally different thing. And this is the final one of the voluntary offerings. I just want to make sure we've exhausted everything about this offering. I want to remind us of the procedure that the priest has to inspect the offering. That just because you came with an offering doesn't mean you're going to be accepted. The offering must be inspected before it is sacrificed. Also, remind us that in all these offerings, it is the offerer, in all the ones we've looked at so far, it's the offerer who slays the animal. But before he slays it, he's going to press down his hand on it as a means of identification with the animal. And so this is procedure for them. After all that is done, that is the offerer brings the animal, the priest inspects, once the priest says, yes, this is a wholesome animal, the offerer puts his hands on it, lays his hands, according to Jewish tradition, he presses down on it, and then he slays it. It is a priest now, sorry, not the high priest, but the officiating priest who will now take the blood and take the meat and lay it on the altar and do whatever is required. And that is why people see the book of Leviticus as a manual for the priests. You can appreciate that they had to be doing it to the specifications that God has given. And so they needed a manual that they could follow and say, here is how this offering is to be done. Now, we have looked only so far at the whole burnt offering, the grain offering, or otherwise called the meal offering, and the peace offering. And you can see the different details and nuances of it. So you can appreciate that they need a manual. And so that's why the chief purpose for the book of Leviticus being written is to give them a manual. But in it, God coded all his prophetic messages, very important ones for us to follow and to understand. I've heard it said, and I do believe it, that if you knew nothing about the book of Leviticus, it would be very difficult to understand the book of Hebrews. You know, and if you can ever imagine, just think, if you had no Old Testament and somebody tells you, you know, you have to shed blood for sin to be atoned, it would be in a vacuum. You wouldn't have any reference point. You wouldn't understand. There's so many things we do in our new covenant that we would not understand. You know, and by the way, I hope you noticed that there's a grain component or bread component to some of these offerings, and that Jesus Christ said he's the bread of life, right? So nothing is wasted in terms of the scriptures. They all mean something. Right. So I hope you noticed too that there was a wave offering, that the portion before the high priest even consumed it, before the priest consumed it, it was waved before the Lord. And so that is very significant as well.
Question, Pastor.
Go right ahead.
The grain offering or the peace offering that gets waved as well?
They wave it apart. They wave some of the meat. They wave some of the meat. I'm not sure if the grain offering was waved, but I could look into that. But I know that portions of the meat were waved. You can go looking into it and tell us what you find. I'm not sure about the breads being waved. Maybe it was, but the meat offering was waved. And there are two types of wave offering. They had one going like this across, and they had a heave offering that was often given as well. And they had to follow specifications as to when to do what. Right? So you can go and look in to see if any of the grain offering was waved. And I'll also look, but not right now. I'll look afterwards. I want to give a testimony I heard, which helps to demonstrate how the vow offering was used. And I think this lady who did it, I think she's a Jew as well, but she had trusted God to pay her mortgage. And mortgage is a monthly payment. And she always was praying, God, please help me to pay my mortgage. Help me never to have a foreclosure on my house. Keep my kids in school. And, God did it for 30 years. She paid her mortgage. She brought her kids through school. And when the 30 years was up, she decided to give a free will offering to God. Her free will offering was something above what she normally give. And what she decided to do is every month for 12 months, she decided to give the money she used to pay for her mortgage. This was not required by anybody. Nobody was forcing her. Nobody was making promises to her of how God is going to bless her. This is a true demonstration of a free will offering. And, so you can get a picture now of the free will offering that was also a part of the peace offering, a part of the purpose. I don't know if there are any questions on the peace offering, but if there are none, we're going to go in the sin offering. All right, let's go to Leviticus chapter 4.
Not a question, but I did find
right ahead.
that the wave offering is a part of the peace offering.
Oh, they also wave some of the breads.
It appears that way. So I
Yes.
guess more reading beside.
Yeah, man,
All
that's
right.
okay, because I definitely know they're waves of the meat, so they probably waves of the bread as well. Okay. Right. So let's look now on the sin offering.
The Lord said to me,
before you read, we're now out of our voluntary offerings. Our voluntary offerings, the whole burnt offering, the grain offering, and the peace offering. These are voluntary, right? There is one little thing I didn't point out. But it might come out here. So let me wait and see what happens. So now we're at the sin offering. This was mandatory. You had to do this, right? So let's look at it.
The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands.
Pause here for a minute. When I was looking at this, I was blown away by one fact that made me see something about God I never knew before. No. I wouldn't say I didn't know it before, but it came with a new reality. You see these Levitical sacrifices? None of them was for real rebellious sin. When it says intentionally, it meant exactly that. It was for sin you did and you didn't even realize your sin, and then later on maybe reading the word, hearing somebody preach, or having somebody approach you, or maybe just a spiritual wisdom came to you, and you realize, my goodness, I sinned. Unintentional sin. It also meant like it involved people, you're striving to please God, you're really working hard at pleasing the Lord, but you missed the mark, you didn't quite make it, and so sin occurred. But the other type of sin, a kind of willful disobedience. I know God don't want this, but me, I'm going to do it anyway. Oh my goodness. Even saying it brings a fear of God to my heart. Because this sacrifice could not be used for that kind of sin. When I was reading it, I studied, I said, my goodness, God, this is making me the fear of God come into my life, right? We should never be rebellious, willful sinners. Never. There's a chapter in the New Testament I know somebody might remember his phone. I didn't plan to use it. It actually says that if there's somebody who sins, who has tasted of the heavenly gift, and then go into sin, there's no forgiveness of sin. I mean, I don't want to make a theology out of it that gives people hopelessness. That's not my intention. My intention is to make each of us fear God more, to make each of us understand more how important it is to guard ourselves against sin. I think our generation has become very careless about sin. You know, we just, ask God forgiveness. You know, and we're not seeing how God sees sin, the gravity of it. So I want at the end of it just to pray for us, to pray for the church, not just our church, but the church in general, concerning how we regard sin. So let us continue reading.
The anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people. He must bring to the Lord a young bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. He is to present the bull at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on its head and slaughter it there before the Lord. Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and carry it into the tent of meeting. He is to dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain of the sanctuary.
Let me just take time and go through it, because I don't want anybody to become confused. This particular offering, the sin offering, it had categories. So here's dealing with the high priest. Now, the high priest is supposed to be the example for the nation. He's the one who is the representative between Israel and God. And he's saying if he sins, now here is what he do. He's to take a bull, right? A bull. So one is very specific about what he's to take, a bull. It also mentions the congregation and the tabernacle being purified, because you see, he is on earth in charge of the tabernacle in an earthly sense. So when he sins, when you read deeply into the scripture, it is saying he brings or he indicts sin on Israel. And we've seen it more than once in the scriptures when the leaders of Israel sin. And God said, the nation is sinful before him. Sometimes it is that their example has caused sin among the people. Because you see, if the high priest sin, then it's going to give a certain liberty to many in the rank and file to sin. So this particular part of the sin offering, when the high priest sin, he's to bring a bull, also encloses in that the fact that it's the same sacrifice for the whole congregation, not an individual, but all of Israel, the people as a people. Also, it's a bull that has to be sacrificed. So in a sense, it's almost like in the sin offering, there's a marriage between the sin of the high priest and the sin of the people as a whole, right? A bull must be sacrificed. And it is treated a little differently, because not only is this seen as a contamination of the high priest himself, the people in general, but also a contamination of the tabernacle. So he has to go through the entire routine. You know the routine. It has to be inspected. He has to lay his hand on it. Then it has to be slaughtered. Then he's to take the blood. And this time, he's to sprinkle it 7 times at the curtain. And this is the curtain right before the Holy of Holies, the holiest place. So he's not to go inside. The high priest only went inside once per year. But right here now, it is sprinkled just outside the curtain. And he's to do it 7 times. So there's a cleansing before God for the house itself. And he is to put some, listen to this one, on the horns of the altar of incense. This is where the altar of incense was, that altar just outside the curtain of the tabernacle. Now remember, don't mix it up with the brazen altar at the entrance. This is right at the entrance of the most holy place. Right outside that curtain. So he has to put some blood there as well. And that altar of incense represents the prayers of the saints. Now, what did the high priest do there on a regular basis? When he's ministering in the tabernacle on a regular basis, his job was to make sure incense made in accordance with how God stipulated was placed on that altar twice a day. So I had to do it in the morning, in the evening, and the priest had to see that it didn't go out. And that represents our prayers. When I was listening to it, I said, God, wow, our prayers must always be going up to God. So I put blood there as well, because our prayers must be pure, it must be holy. God doesn't want prayers to be offered from an impure heart. That's not good enough, right? So even though the prayers sound good, the incense is built to specification, but once there's sin, it tarnishes it. So yes, all our words are correct. We're using the right jargon, the right language, but if we have sin, it tarnishes the prayer. So this is how he is the minister. So on a regular day, he will not be putting any blood on the altar. He'd be lighting those incense and letting that go up to God, as in representing the prayers of himself and Israel, or his prayers on behalf of Israel. But not because he has sinned, he has to put blood on the horns of that altar. And then he would come out, and what did he do next with the blood? After he sprinkled it 7 times in front of the curtain, and he shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is before the Lord. I think reading and rereading this thing, because it is not totally easy to understand and to pull apart all the threads of the sacrifices. So as I kept listening and listening, it brought me such an appreciation of prayer. And one of the things that I remember about prayer, God said, listen, pray without ceasing. This altar of incense should never go out. So it brought a real appreciation again of prayer, that we're to dwell in a mode of prayer before God, right? So I put the thing there, the blood, and it says, the rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering at the entrance. Now this is the other altar now, and he's to pour the rest at the base of the altar, right? So you can appreciate, you should by now know the format or the form of the tabernacle and appreciate where the brazen altar is. So he pours it out there, right? And that's for the high priest and the people of Israel. It had to be a bull. And, I've asked myself, why a bull? But the bull was one of the most valuable assets of the people of Israel. That's one reason. I believe there are other reasons too, but I'll just leave it there for now. That is one of the most valuable assets. God wanted to communicate to the people how significant the sin of the high priest and the entire congregation was before him. So whatever was offered had to be extremely valuable. It was not saying women were not good enough or females were not good enough. It was to demonstrate something. Let me tell you, God had to be trying, and I said this last week, I'm going to try and say it again. God had to be trying to communicate with people. Here is this ascended God. He's great, he's elevated, and he is trying to communicate certain things to Israel and to us. Now, let me tell you a little piece of something I read somewhere. The person was saying, when Moses disappeared or went up on the mountain to receive the commandments and to commune with God, and Aaron and the people built that calf, it was actually very significant, because what it was saying is that we as mankind, we love to see tangible representations of God. That's how we're created. We're created first with a hunger for God. Never forget that every single human being created has a hunger for God. I've heard people describe it as the God space in us. The God space. But beyond that now, how do we meet this? How do we communicate with this God? How do we visualize and see this God? There's this constant need for a tangible representation. That's why they built the golden calf. And that is why also God had to start the list of his commands by saying, do not build any graven image of me. Don't do it. Because he knew that was an immediate temptation of human beings. Not only from their own humanity, which demands this tangible representation, but also it was from the fact that they were living among many pagan nations in which the same need was being displayed day after day after day, where the craving for this tangible representation of God was being expressed. And they were making many, many idols because of this craving. So God said, you don't do it. But remember, God built us. God knows us. He knows we're going to be tempted to do this. So what did God do? God now wants to be the one who decides, how are you going to meet this need to have a tangible understanding of me? I am going to give it to you because I found you. I know you, and I know you have this thing in you. So I'm going to show you a tabernacle. I'm going to give you the exact pattern, and you're going to build it according to my prescription. This will be my tangible representation. I'm going to come and live with you, and I'm going to be seated between the cherubim in the most holy place. And I'm going to formulate various ways that will communicate to you who I am, how I think, because I know you need it. I believe the tabernacle, the construction of the tabernacle, and all of this whole system of sacrifices was actually an act of God's mercy and kindness, because he built us and he knows us and he knows how to direct us, right? So when God chose a bull for the high priest and for the nation as a whole, he was saying, listen, high priest, your role is very significant. When you sin, it is serious. You must be very, very careful. Now, here's what the high priest had to do. So after he put the blood for himself and the people at the base of the brazen altar, do you know what God told him to do with the rest of the animal? It was not eaten like in the fellowship offering, and it was not burned on the brazen altar. It was actually to be brought outside the camp to a clean place, a set apart, clean place outside the camp, and it's to be burned there, outside the camp. Now, this place was set apart. It was not dump. It wasn't like the city dump, where you say all the waste matter from Israel in the wilderness, you're going to take it outside the camp and dump it. Not like that. This was a clean place. So all the ashes from the altar, etc., from all the burnt sacrifices, they were also placed there. I don't want to say dump there, because dump suggests waste, but God looked at it like that. It had to be in this very clean place outside the camp. Now, there's a very important truth I discovered as I tried to familiarize myself with this entire ritual. And I want you to visualize it. Can you imagine this high priest? He was the theocratic head of Israel on earth. He was the representative of God. When he was carrying out this meat, the skin, and all the rest of the meat, except for the fat, the liver, kidney, the fat around them, and the tail area and the fat around it, etc. When he was carrying it out, he had to walk right through Israel. Now, a bull is, I don't know if you know a bull, but a bull is a very heavy creature. I'm not sure how he carried it. I think I'd love to do a little bit more investigation when he used a cart, or he had to make many trips, or he got help. I can't tell you, but it can be investigated. But whatever it was, he had to walk right through Israel. And so everybody knows he had sinned. His family would know, his friends would know, all the people would know. Everybody knew the high priest had sinned, because the high priest had to leave from the tabernacle right through the crowd to carry his sin offering to that clean place outside the camp. And there's so many New Testament equivalencies to this, that when a pastor or leader sins, the sin really should not be covered over and hidden, but it should be exposed, not to bring disgrace, but to bring respect and order for God's house. And for us all to remember also that what was taking place here was not a destruction of the high priest, but rather it was God trying to show him how to get his sin dealt with. So it was a restorative kind of thing, right? So apart from getting rid of the sin, there was restoration of his relationship with God. And I also believe there was a restoration of himself. And here's what I mean by of himself. So often we sin. Sin is destructive. Sin is damaging. And so this restoration of himself was all that emotional damage that he did to himself when he sinned. So he'd be restoring relationships on every side, with God, he'd be taking away the sin, then he'd restore the relationship with God. In himself, he'd be restoring relationship. And perhaps with other people who are around by him in the whole effort or the whole matter of sin. So to me, this is very, very significant, right? Right. So it says, yes, you have to bring it, make sure it happened. Don't be trivial about what takes place with the leader of the church. It's not something you can go, yeah, I see the pastor do this past. It's not like that. You have to be careful when you bring an accusation. Excuse me. But when it is true and proven true, then the person should be dealt with. It cannot be just hidden because of the gravity of the position that a leader holds. I think every single church leader should think a lot when he sees this particular passage in the New Testament, but also what is written in Leviticus concerning the high priest. All right, let us go now to back to Leviticus chapter 4, and let's finish reading. Where were we? Which verse? Yes, I think it's about yes.
He shall remove all the fat from it and burn it on the altar, and do with this bull just as he did with the bull sin offering. This way, the priest will make atonement for the community.
All right. So what he did, he said, just as he did with the first bull. Remember, I was telling you that he is dealing with sin for himself and for the community. I was telling that they're very married, and the community means everybody, not just one person. So the high priest had to deal with sin. When he sinned, he had to also deal with the community, right? And in a sense, when the community sinned, he had to deal with himself. And so this the same prescription, that bull, and was done in the same way, the same order. As you read down, you're going to see the other sin offerings were treated differently. All right? So let's continue.
Then he shall take the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burned the first bull. This is the sin offering for the community. When a leader sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the commands of the Lord, his God, when he realizes his guilt and the sin he has committed becomes known, he must bring as his offering, a male goat without defect.
All right, let me
He
deal
is
with
to
this
lay his hand.
Pause on me. I was wanting to see the difference. So there's a high priest and there's the entire congregation. In a sense that I said they're married in that first sacrifice. That's the bull. Then no, it's dealing with like leaders in the community leaders. People are supposed to be leading the people. All right. So you first thing you'll notice when he realizes, when he sins unintentionally, and then he realizes his guilt, and the sin he has committed becomes known, he must bring as his offering a male goat without defect. You notice a change in the offering. So this is now a male goat without defect, right? Continue reading.
He is to lay his hand on the goat's head and slaughter it at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering.
All right, pause here. You notice he does not go into the tabernacle and sprinkle this blood by the curtain. And he doesn't put any of this blood on the horn of the altar of incense either. What does he do with the blood here? Right? He takes his finger and puts it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering first. That is the first altar, the brazen altar, right? Continue. He pours the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. So it's treated differently. So the sacrificial animal is different, and the treatment is different, right? Continue.
He shall burn all the fat on the altar as he burned the fat of the fellowship offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for the leader's sin and he will be forgiven. If any member of the community sins unintentionally.
All right, this is a third category. You might prefer to say a fourth category. Remember, the first two were married, the entire people and the high priest. Then there was the second category, the leaders among the people, right? The community leaders. And now this is the third category, is dealing with individuals in the society. You did something unintentionally and you realize, goodness, I sinned against God. So now you're going to deal with yourself as an individual. You can continue reading.
So if any member of the community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, when they realize their guilt and the sin they have committed, they must bring as their offering for the sin they committed a female goat without defect.
A female goat without defect, right?
They are to lay their hand.
Right. So just pause. So here, I think you're breaking up, Zaki. So here, what is, this is a female goat. Now remember the value in the agrarian society: the bull, the male goat, the female goat. Each of them have a different value, right? So this is the demo. What God is trying to communicate to the people of Israel is the gravity of sin in the high priest, the gravity of sin in the leaders, and now here the common man. And all of us want to lead, but we have to think very keenly about what leadership implies and the responsibility it carries. That's very important. So for the common man, he can bring a female goat, right? And then continue reading.
They are to lay their hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place of the burnt offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. They shall remove all the fat, just just as the fat is removed from the fellowship offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them, and they will be forgiven.
Oh, Jesus.
If someone brings a lamb as their sin offering, they are to bring a female without defect. They are to lay their hands on its head and slaughter it for a sin offering at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering.
So, all right. So what you're seeing here, they can bring a female goat or a female lamb, right? This is for the common man now as an individual. All right, go ahead.
Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. They shall remove all the fat, just as the fat is removed from the lamb of the fellowship offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar on top of the food offerings presented to the Lord. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them for the sin they have committed, and they will be forgiven.
Yes, the sin that they have committed will be forgiven. All right. I hope this is very plain. So we are now completing the sin offering, right? And you have seen. So we have looked at the 3 voluntary offerings: the whole burnt offering, the grain offering, and the peace offering. And we've said these don't have anything to do with sin. And we're now looking at a sin offering, which does have to do with sin. And we've learned that it's for unintentional sin, right? We've also learned that God has stipulated different value animals to different individuals in the Israel community. The high priest and the entire congregation as a collective being the most grave, right, and having the highest value animal being sacrificed, then the leaders in the community, and then the common man. And each of these animals had a different value. We also learned that the high priest, when he erred, when he sinned, he had to purify not only himself, but the tabernacle where he ministered and the people collectively because of who he was in the society. You know, as you go away and meditate for the week, I'm going to ask you to read the whole passage in the book of Samuel concerning Levi and his sons, and you'll realize how grave their sin was. I'm sure it's in Samuel, right? Hope I got the reference correctly, right? So you need to go back and read it in comparison to what God says here and be able to appreciate how gravely they sinned against God. So if there are no questions or anybody can add something, then we'll break here. Any questions or any additions?
Just asking you to repeat the reference in Samuel, please.
You can look for it very quickly. It's dealing with Eli's sons and how they treated the altar and the sacrifices. You know, what they did, they just wanted the best portion. They wanted to decide which portion of meat they wanted. And they didn't want it to be done in the way God said. They wanted raw meat to do it their way, you know. So they were trying to dictate to God how they were fed and what was done, you know, to them and in honor of them. And that was a no for God. If you can find a reference, it'd be good. Found it? Eli.
It's in 1 Samuel chapter 2.
1 Samuel chapter 2. So when you read that, you can contrast it to the requirements of God and see how gravely Israel and the high priest family had sinned. So we're going to break here for today.
Just my question.
Go right
just
ahead.
To say that the 4 you kind of came up with 4 categories as stipulated for how the sin offering is to be carried out.
Yes.
First category, the high priest. Second category,
it's 4 categories, but one of them is married to each other. So it would be more like
high priest and the congregation then.
And the entire people. So it's almost like more like 3 because of this.
I wanted to get that proper because
right.
Those sets of persons know the bull is required, which is
bull is required. So you do one for himself and one for the congregation. The bull is required.
Okay, so anytime you're doing that particular sacrifice,
right?
It's both are married.
Okay. Go back to the passage that look at that, Shyster or O'Neill. O'Neill, sorry. And you will see it says, and then take the other bull. Right? Oh, okay. So if you go back to 4, the beginning of 4, chapter 4. Go right near the beginning. Go.
Ali's looking for that, Rev.
Yes, go ahead.
The lamb only features for female is featured for the that is 3rd tier.
The people.
That's the common
individual. The individual. Okay. Right. So
but that's what specifically said the female lamb.
The female, because I explained to you that sometimes you have to look behind what God is trying to communicate. Because God, this great and mighty God, is trying to communicate to the simple people like you and I. And so in their society, a bull was the most expensive thing.
Yes.
And if you look at the second category, which were the leaders, not the high priest,
so they
had to bring the male goat, the ram, which was the next most expensive. And so by the time it came to the common man, God is saying, yes, you can bring a female lamb or female goat. You can bring because that was less expensive, and so it was that God is devaluing any gender, not devaluing any of his creatures, but he's trying to communicate to his people. That's why it has to be explained, because in our society, we would not even know, what the value each thing has, or understand that this is a value kind of
so just to understand.
Approach, yes.
The male lamb doesn't carry much value here because it's not even featured.
The male lamb. But that a ram, you need to look back at the second offering. If it's only a ram goat, because the sheep is also a ram, You realize, right? They're both rams.
Okay.
And in most of the sacrifices, let's say, whether from the herd or from the flock, herd being right. Okay. Well, I'm not so sure. But I know herd is definitely cattle. I'm not sure. I know flock is sheep, but I need to double check on how they refer to the goat. Whether it's I think it would be a flock too. But what I'm saying here is that ram can be a ram out of the sheep. Remember the ram caught in the thicket with Abraham?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It was a male sheep. Excuse me. So it could it could be. Sometime in translation, you have to read a number of translations to see how they translate the ram, whether this, because they might put a goat when in fact it may be a goat or a sheep. But that would be a very nice point to look into. But even if it's a ram goat specifically, it would not necessarily mean the ram sheep was not of value, because all God wants is to communicate to them value. So he wouldn't have to bring in every single equivalent component anyway. They would immediately understand what he was trying to say, right? So yeah. So I hope everybody understands, right? But this is a learning process, and so over the week, if it's anything and you want to share next week, feel free. And God bless. Have a great week.
God bless you too, Pastor. Goodbye, everybody.